Lake Mead is 15 feet away from a switch nobody can flip back. At a water level of 1,035 feet, 12 of Hoover Dam's 17 turbines can no longer run. That is 70% of the power this dam can make, gone in a single afternoon. Tom Bushatsky, director of the Arizona Department of Water Resources, said in mid-May that the lake is going to 1,035, and there is no question about it. What almost nobody outside the grid control rooms knew until this year is which towns go first. It is not Las Vegas. Hoover Dam makes about 4 billion kilowatt hours in an average year. That is enough electricity for roughly 1.3 million people spread across Nevada, Arizona, and California. Every kilowatt hour of it is already promised out by contract, down to 4 decimal points. Nevada's share is 23.3706%. Arizona's share is 18.9527%. The Metropolitan Water District of Southern California takes 28.5393%. Los Angeles, 270 miles from the dam, takes 15.4229%. Boulder City, Nevada, 8 miles down the road from the powerhouse, takes 1.7672%. That tiny slice is about 57% of every kilowatt-hour Boulder City uses. Within 12 months, every utility on that contract list will know exactly what a reading of 1,035 feet means. The lake read 1,051 feet on May 26, 2026. It read 1,049.24 feet on June 4th. This month it sits near 1,044 feet, roughly 3 feet above the lowest level ever recorded in the lake's 90-year history, and it is dropping roughly 1 foot every 5 to 7 days. Do that math, and the cliff arrives before Halloween. Boulder City, Nevada, 1931. Nothing there but desert brush and a work camp for a dam that did not exist yet. The Bureau of Reclamation built the town to house the men pouring concrete into Black Canyon, and when the dam came online, it was wired straight into the machine it had built. 90 years later, that wiring is still the reason Boulder City holds one of the oldest power contracts on the dam. Then came 1983. Snowpack in the Rockies came in so heavy that water topped the raised spillway gates on July 3rd and kept pouring through them until September. It was the first time the spillways had run since 1941. On July 24th, 1983, the lake peaked at 1,225 feet, the highest reading in its history. A full lake sits at 1,229 feet, so it never quite got there. Every year since has taken water away. By 2000, the lake was still holding near 1,200 feet, and Hoover was running close to its rated output of more than 2,000 megawatts. Lincoln County Power District, serving about 5,000 people in the desert north of Las Vegas, bought every kilowatt hour it needed from the dam and nothing else. One source, one bill, and no need for a backup plan. In 2011, President Obama signed the Hoover Power Allocation Act, a law that locked Nevada's share of the dam's power in place until at least 2067. The contracts were rewritten to start in 2017, spreading Hoover power across more utilities in southern Nevada than before. Jane Harkins, then executive director of the Colorado River Commission of Nevada, said at the time that Boulder City would lose a little of what it got, though not by much. Nobody signing those contracts was planning for a lake that could not turn the turbines. By July 2022, the surface had fallen to 1,041.30 feet. That was the lowest reading since April 1937, when the lake was still filling for the first time. 2 decent snow years pulled it back up into the 1060s and 1070s, and a lot of people quietly filed the crisis away as solved. Nobody had solved it. The water was borrowed, not paid back. A full Lake Mead has room for about 26 million acre-feet. 1 acre-foot is roughly 326,000 gallons. Today, the lake holds close to 28% of that. A lake built to store several years of Colorado River flow is holding a fraction of 1. The surface now sits about 180 feet below the 1983 high water line. The winter of 2025 into 2026 delivered a record low snowpack across the upper Colorado. Not below average, record low. in a river system with nothing left in reserve to take the hit. In April 2026, the Bureau of Reclamation made a decision that never made the national news. It cut water releases out of Lake Powell by 20% for the year. The reason was Glen Canyon Dam. Powell was falling toward its own power shutoff, and the pipes and gates that move its water are fragile enough that Reclamation chose to hold water back rather than risk them. That decision saved Glen Canyon. It also doomed Lake Mead. Every acre-foot held above Glen Canyon Dam is an acre-foot that does not arrive in Black Canyon. Reclamation has since said it plans to hold back roughly 1.48 million acre-feet from the Powell to Mead release through September 2026. In its own words, that speeds up the drop at Lake Mead downstream. Earlier this spring, Mead was falling about 1 foot every 5 days. The clock started in April. Most of the people it applies to could not hear it yet. Now zoom out from the canyon, because the geography carries the whole argument. The Colorado River is a staircase. Snow falls across Colorado, Wyoming, Utah, and New Mexico. It melts into smaller streams, collects behind Glen Canyon Dam as Lake Powell, then gets released downstream through the Grand Canyon and into Lake Mead behind Hoover Dam. 2 lakes, 1 river. 40 million people downstream of both. Nobody built these lakes to run low. They work as buffers, and a buffer only works when there is something in it. Both are now sitting close to what water managers call tripwires, water levels that set off a hard result the moment they are crossed. Lake Powell has one near 3,490 feet, the lowest level that still makes power. Lake Mead has one at 1,035 feet. Below that line, power at Hoover collapses by 70%. Those tripwires are not just talk. The August 2025 24-month study predicted that Lake Mead would begin 2026 below 1,075 feet and above 1,050 feet. And that one prediction legally set the rules for the whole year. Under the 2007 interim guidelines and the 2024 record of decision that changed them, that reading placed Lake Mead in a shortage condition for calendar year 2026. Water deliveries to Arizona, Nevada, and Mexico were cut before this summer started. The lake fell anyway. Up to this point, every trip wire crossed on the Colorado River had been about water deliveries. This one is about electricity. And here is the detail that everyone missed at the time. That 1,035 number has nothing to do with the water running out. Dead pool at Lake Mead, the level where water can no longer push through the dam on its own, is 895 feet. The lake is 149 feet above that. The problem at 1,035 is not the amount of water. It is the height of it. A water turbine does not run on water. It runs on the weight of water stacked above it, the distance straight down from the lake surface to the turbine blades. Engineers call that head. With a full lake at Hoover, that column is hundreds of feet tall, and every gallon that drops through the steel pipes arrives with enormous force. Drop the surface 180 feet, and that force drops with it. The turbine spins slower, makes less, and eventually stops working right at all because the blades were shaped for a certain pressure. Push water through them at the wrong pressure and you get shaking, pitted metal, and damage. 12 of Hoover's 17 main units were built for a lake that no longer exists. 5 units in the powerhouse are wide-head turbines built to keep working at low water. The other 12 are not. Those 12 do not fail at 1,035 feet. They get switched off, on purpose, to protect them. Reclamation runs power tests on those units as the water level changes. So the numbers in the federal studies are real readings taken at the dam, not guesses off a blueprint. On May 21st, 2026, Reclamation announced it will spend $52 million on 3 more wide-head turbines, built to make power down to a level of 950 feet. Scott Cameron, the acting Reclamation Commissioner, called the funding critical upgrades to one of the nation's most important power plants. Once those 3 are installed and join the 5 already in the powerhouse, the cut at 1,035 feet drops from 70% to 58%. Better, still huge. And when Circle of Blue asked Reclamation for a date on the work, the press office did not answer before publication. The lake is not waiting for the turbines. So now the part the headlines get wrong. Las Vegas does not run on Hoover Dam. It never has. NV Energy, the utility that serves most of the Las Vegas Valley, has put its share of Colorado River Commission of Nevada Power at roughly 2% of its supply. The commission is the body that holds Nevada's federal power contracts. The rest comes from natural gas plants and a fast-growing fleet of solar. More than half of Nevada's electricity is made by burning gas. The city of Las Vegas, as a city government, does draw about 29% of the power for its own buildings from Hoover. That is, streetlights and City Hall, not the Strip. So the Strip is not going dark. Natalie Voisin, a scientist at Pacific Northwest National Laboratory, put it plainly on the record. In her words, this does not mean that the grid is going to go dark. If you are finding this useful, subscribe. We cover Western water and the systems that depend on it every week, with the full picture you need to actually follow what is going on. The damage lands somewhere much smaller and much harder to see, and it lands in a specific order. First, Boulder City. In the power use figures the Colorado River Commission of Nevada used to set the shares in place today, about 57% of the city's electricity came straight out of Hoover, and roughly 71% came from federal water power overall. It is the single most at-risk community on the whole system, and it is the town the dam built. Second, Lincoln County. Lincoln County Power District Number 1 serves about 5,000 people and takes roughly 70% of its electricity from Hoover. Dane Bradfield, general manager of the district, is one of the people who has to solve this in real time. He has locked in enough power through 2026 and is already buying for 2027. Asked how the summer is going, he said it is not a kickback summer by any means. Bradfield's district has been buying solar to fill part of the hole, which already softened the gap it took in recent years. He predicts how much power he will need and how much he will get, then buys the difference on the open market a year ahead. Prices right now are lower than they were a year or two ago, which is the only reason the math still works. His stated plan is to keep buying early and be ready for the moment the bottom falls out of it. Third, the mid-sized rural districts. On those same commission figures, Overton Power District Number 5 pulls about 12% of its power from Hoover. Valley Electric Association pulls about 7%. Small numbers on paper, very real when they disappear on an August afternoon. Fourth, the people paying the bills who never see the dam at all. Jordi Fuentes, executive director of the Arizona Power Authority, sells Arizona's share of Hoover's electricity. The rate his customers pay covers running and fixing the dam, the visitor center, work to protect the river, and paying back the cost of building the Central Arizona Project Canal. Those costs are fixed. The electricity available to spread them across is not. Fuentes figures the rate could triple. His open question is whether the cost gets spread out over years or whether there is simply a hole in the budget. In his words, will there be a lag in how they recover those costs? Fifth, and this is the one nobody is watching, the Western grid itself. While utilities count kilowatt hours, grid operators are counting something else entirely. The electricity Hoover makes is only half of what the grid buys from it. The other half is how fast Hoover can change how much it makes. Voisin describes what Hoover provides as ramping services. The plainest way to picture it is a dimmer. Most of the Western fleet has a light switch, on or off, with a warm-up time measured in minutes or hours. Hoover has a dimmer knob, and an operator can turn it by hand in seconds. That matters most in the early evening in July. When desert air temperatures peak, solar output falls off a cliff as the sun goes down, and millions of homes across the desert Southwest turn on air conditioning, ovens, and chargers within the same hour. Somebody has to fill that gap in real time. Hoover has been filling it for 90 years, and it has been the cheapest way to do it. Take 70% of the dimmer away, and the grid still works. It just costs more, because gas plants that fire up fast and battery storage have to do the same job at a higher price. What that looks like from a kitchen in Henderson or Kingman is nothing at all, most days. The lights stay on. The bill arrives 2 months later and it is higher. And nothing printed on the statement explains that a lake up the river dropped below a line in a federal operating plan. How much more? Nobody has published that number yet. Katie Rogers, manager of reliability assessment for the Western Electricity Coordinating Council, is the person trying to find it. The council keeps watch on the power grid across the western states. and what it finds feeds the national reports put out by the North American Electric Reliability Corporation. Rogers said the council is now working with water scientists at Pacific Northwest National Laboratory and a second federal laboratory in the Rockies to model what happens when Hoover's capacity collapses. The models let them switch the dam off and watch the grid respond under different heat, power, and demand cases. Do the new big batteries going in cover the loss of Hoover's ramping? Is a spring heat wave worse than a summer spike? The question she keeps coming back to is the honest one. Can the other areas of the grid make up for what may be lost? She also said they do not necessarily have the answers yet. Think about the timing there for a second. The group in charge of keeping the grid running in 14 western states is building the model for this case in 2026. In the same summer the case is expected to arrive. The Council's 2026 Summer Outlook talks about drought, extreme heat, wildfire, and less water power in broad terms. Brian D'Agostino of San Diego Gas and Electric said during a council webinar in early May that the region has to stop looking at single risks and start looking at what happens when 2 or 3 arrive together. That is the case. Record low snowpack, a 70% cut at Hoover, and a July heat wave, all in the same week. Now compare that to where this system started. In 2000, Lake Mead was basically full. Hoover was running near capacity, and Lincoln County bought all of its power from the dam. Today, Hoover makes between 40% and 50% less electricity than it did that year. Not because anything broke, because 180 feet of water left the lake. That drop happened before the 1,035-foot cliff. The cliff is on top of it, and the forecasts do not turn around. Reclamation's most likely modeling puts Lake Mead near 1,040 feet this month, then another 30 feet lower over the following 2 years, reaching roughly 1,011 feet by May 2028. And somehow, it gets worse. Reclamation has separately flagged the chance of up to an additional 40% cut in Hoover's power capacity as early as this fall, tied to the faster drop rather than to the 1,035-foot mark. There is one thing that could delay the cliff. Arizona, California, and Nevada have proposed a plan to save water that might hold Mead above 1,035 feet until next spring. Whether it works depends on how much water those states leave in the lake, how hot August gets, and what the summer monsoon delivers. A new plan for the whole river basin is due in October, and some states have already threatened lawsuits over it. So the timing is not fixed. The direction is. There is a wider fight sitting underneath all of it. The rules for how the Colorado River gets divided run out after 2026, and the basin states have not produced a replacement. Several have already raised the chance of lawsuits, and the federal government stepping in if the October deadline passes without a deal. Every month those talks run without an agreement is another month the lake keeps falling under the old rules, which leaves a stack of questions that nobody in this story can answer yet. If the Western Electricity Coordinating Council does not know whether the grid can take the loss, who decided it was acceptable to find out live? Why is the model being built the same year as the event? If the 3 new wide-head turbines have no published start date, what covers the gap between the cliff and the fix? Who pays when the cheapest power on the Western grid becomes some of the most expensive? And what happens to a town like Boulder City, which gets 57% of its power from a dam it was built to construct, when 12 of that dam's 17 turbines are switched off to keep them from destroying themselves? Jordi Fuentes has the clearest read on the long term. Absent a change in the hydrology, he says, the hydropower resource in both the upper and lower basin is in trouble, and it is tied directly to drought. The hydrology is not changing. 8 turbines line the Nevada side of Hoover Dam's powerhouse, and this afternoon, the floor under all of them is still shaking. Every day, at an office in Boulder City, Reclamation posts one number for the lake behind them, measured to the 100th of a foot. Today, that number still starts with a 1, a 0, and a 4.